here to talk to us about emotional intelligence and how we can apply it to our everyday lives clinically, related to teaching, related to all levels of our lives. It's Dr. Patrice Weiss. Please join me in welcome.
Thanks for that introduction. I think you've really set some pretty high expectations there. You know, if you spend your life in search of IQ and then you find EI or EQ, you feel like you found a treat. So that was supposed to be my first joke, and that totally bombed. I am completely self-aware that that one did not go over well. But anyway, so no, thank you. I think some of you have probably heard me give the EI talk. So this is a little bit of a different spin. So what I've tried to do was dress it up a little bit and pull in really EI as it relates to and lets us think about what's our organizational culture and how does EI play into that, and then how does EI play into both our patient experience as well as how does it tie into how we interact with each other. So hopefully I'll meet your expectations, although I have to say Sherry gave me quite an introduction there that's a little bit hard. And now you're probably all wondering what really is my IQ. And I don't really know, but I know my SAT scores are really nothing to brag about, so we'll just move right on. First of all, what are some of our objectives? Well, I hope when you walk out of here, and I really appreciate you guys all giving me 2.5 hours today. That's so kind of you. That one got a little bit of a stir, all right? I got you there a little bit. No, I'll keep it moving, I promise. But to list the elements of emotional intelligence, and there's really 5 key domains of emotional intelligence, and we're going to walk through those together. And like I said, try to pull in how can that affect our organizational culture, how does it affect how we interact with each other, and then also our patient experience. Describe the importance of EI on what I just said, culture and patient experience. And then how can we every day, right, try to implement some of those domains of emotional intelligence into both our personal and our professional lives. So we'll see what we can do from that aspect. I have no disclosures. I have nothing relevant. I plan to get a couple chicken salad wraps out of today, so that's really my conflict of interest, but nothing to report to you. So first, let's talk a little bit about, and it's kind of neat, I guess, to give this because we're all part of Carilion, so we talk about what's our organizational EI, we're all in it together. But we think about what's our culture, what is our EI, and how do we interact with each other on a regular and a daily basis. And it brings me back to a story, and I think I already see some of you nodding, but when you think about the story of one of our terminally ill patients who was just short of about 30 years old, who had been in the hospital for a long time, was ventilator bound, and was really nearing the end of his days. And really one of his wishes on his birthday was he wanted to be able to see his pet. And for those of you that heard that story before, you have to bear with us, and you know, the team thought, well, I mean, how hard can that be for someone to see their pet? And then we learned that his pet was a horse. Well, we've had dog therapy and we've had pet therapy, but I don't know that we've ever actually had a horse come in. But instead of us as a system saying, man, that's just, I mean, a horse, how are we going to make this happen? Really, everybody rallied together. Nursing rallied together, physicians rallied together, surgery rallied together, support services rallied together to make this possible, that he could and to see his horse. And his horse was brought to the outside. Wasn't brought actually into the floors, but to the outside. But think about this. The team it took, the culture it took, a ventilator-bound patient to be able to get outside to see his horse and his pet. So the folks who got him out there, the folks who stayed back and covered the other patients of the nurses and team that took him out, security that did that. So when you think about what does that mean to someone, and shortly thereafter he passed, and his family said that one of the things that meant the most to him is how we as an organization went above and beyond to make this happen for the patient and the patient's experience, and what it meant to them. So it's a lot more than just healing disease and interacting on that level. So let's talk a little bit about what is emotional intelligence. And when I first started talking on this topic, it was probably a good decade or so ago, and I would say, you know, who in this audience is sort of emotional intelligence, and a few hands would go up, and I got asked to come and give a grand round somewhere, and they said, why don't you pick the topic you want to talk on? I said, well, how about emotional intelligence? And the email I got back was, what's that? I said, well, good, we'll at least I'll meet one of my objectives if I can define it. And you know, no surprise, a lot of this information comes from the business world, right? So the business world, as far as development and leadership and emotional intelligence, they've really been ahead of healthcare. So this is from the Harvard Business Review. And look, it's from 1998. I wish I could say, wow, fresh off the press, but this has been out there for a while. Now, I'll break Speaker's Rules sort of 101, so I'm going to read you a couple definitions because I think it'll help me make some points. But emotional intelligence is that capacity to recognize our own feelings. Well, that's one of the domains, right, self-awareness. So know what are your feelings at the time, what are your emotions. But also to be able to recognize the feelings of others. So it isn't just all about me, right? There's that other component of others. For managing our emotions well in ourselves, and we'll talk a little bit about that with self-regulation, and in our relationships, right? So it's not just me. And then how do we motivate ourselves and motivate others? And those are really the domains that I'm gonna walk you through today. So those 5 components then are self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. And I think all of us could agree that these are really 5 very important components of what we do daily, maybe sometimes minute to minute, as we take care of patients, we interact with each other, and we participate in the ultimate team sport called the delivery of health care. So let's talk about EI. And yeah, I did pull that little picture from when we did our superheroes conference not too long ago. But so what's self-awareness? Well, self-awareness is that ability to recognize your own emotions, moods, emotions, and drives. Okay, duh, that makes sense. But on EI, it goes that extra step forward. It's sort of self-awareness on steroids, if you would, right? So it's, yeah, I recognize that right now I may not be real happy. I recognize that right now something's getting underneath my skin. But in the self-awareness and an emotional intelligence point, you are then also able to pick up how do your emotions affect others. An example, like having a bad day, you come into work, you don't feel good, you got a lot on your mind, and you're like, you know, I'm really not myself today. So you kind of come in and short, yeah, hello, whatever. Yeah. And with EI, you can step back and say, I recognize where my emotions are out, and I also just really recognize that I've changed the whole tenor of my unit, my admin suite, my whatever, because of how I've interacted with other people. So that's, yeah, it's not good enough to just know where you are, it's then how do you affect other people. And folks in an EI sense who have the high self-awareness, they're self-confident but not arrogant, right? Because they can do pretty realistic self-assessments. If you say, you know, how do you think you did on that? Why don't you do a self-assessment? They're pretty accurate, and they're not just going to do what some of us might do. Of course, none of us in this room, but we might have a friend who does this, where you get the 1 to 5 evaluations, and you just circle the 3s because that's safe. A person with high EI, they can tell you where they think they're a 4 or a 5 and where they think they are a 2. And they have a self-deprecating sense of humor. And you think about, you know, the self-awareness, is how do you really push that negativity? If you sense that negativity, how do you take those negative forces sort of out of the setting? So this isn't really quite, you know, self-awareness and doing the same description. So, you know, this person clearly thinks he's got a 6-pack, right? But that's not really the 6-pack that we're talking about. So when we talk about self-awareness, and by the way, most of this lecture is going to be taught through cartoons and humor, because otherwise I think EI could get to be maybe a little bit dry. But it really is, it's that ability to see yourself as others see you, and then how do you affect others. So clearly he has a 6-pack, but that's not really quite, we're not really on the same page here with our 6-packs. And the reason I might have spent quite a bit of time talking about the self-awareness piece is I truly do believe that self-awareness is the fundamental building block of emotional intelligence. So to build on those other 4 domains that we're going to go through, you've got to have a good idea of self-awareness. It's going to be really hard to have self-regulation if you have no clues about your own self-awareness and your own emotions. So it really is that building block. And it's not what one is better than the other of what you see. You've just got to be able to see yourself as others see you. So fundamental. And you think about, well, how do we do that? You know, how do we help people with their self-awareness? Well, during evaluation season, right? We do a full 360 here, whether it's with our learners or when we have our own evaluations. We're asked, and what's the thing we all dread the most, right? We all dread doing our self-eval, right? But if we really take it seriously, and I'm not saying we don't, we do, but if you think you're a 4 or 5, put a 4 or 5. And if the overall score comes back a 3 or 4, well, that's food for conversation to help to increase. So I would say we've got tools that we are using here to help all of us build our own self-awareness. Okay, 1 down. So what's self-regulation? Well, self-regulation is that ability to control or redirect disruptive impulses. So, for example, you may be sitting there right now thinking, I cannot believe I'm actually sitting in a talk on emotional intelligence. There's so many other things I really should be doing right now. And I'd ask you to try to redirect those disruptive impulses and don't head for the door. Some good videos are coming soon. I promise we'll get through them. But we're constantly getting inundated with thoughts, impulses, and then how do we not act on those, or how do we buy ourselves time so we don't, quote, fly off the handle? Or what I say with the self-regulation, you know, joking, I'll say this is kind of the 1001, 1002, 1003, and it's actually quite interesting, you know, because as we get impulses that are coming into our brain, and by the way, right now you're going to get a little neuroanatomy from an OBGYN, so take it for what it's worth, but we do get impulses, and the way our brain and circuitry is set up is there is about a 0.03 second difference in the impulses going to our amygdala first versus going to our frontal cortex first. And so that 1001, 1002, even if you can get a 1001, 1002 out, you're going to buy yourself just a little bit of time before your amygdala takes over and you've got that what we call the amygdala hijack, and we start thinking and acting, saying things without necessarily having our frontal cortex. So folks with high self-regulation, they're seen as sort of trustworthy, they're comfortable with ambiguity, they're open to change, they don't immediately fly off the handle, but they're going to let processes and things work through. And, you know, let's think a little bit about sort of our day-to-day, you know, activities. You know, can we appropriately call on our red light when we need, you know, I'm really feeling I'm about to lose it right now. Maybe I need to, like, go to my red light and just, as I say, sort of do that 1001, that 1002, that 1003. But when we think about how does this potentially affect the patient experience, lack of self-regulation, or how does it affect the way we interact with each other? Well, I mean, look at those 2 pictures there. I mean, if we've got those sort of responses, if we've got the person who flies off the handle, if you think about, and I remember even back when I was a resident, you know, you'd be circulating and kind of roaming the halls, and you would hear somebody say, well, gosh, we really ought to page Dr. So-and-so, but you know how he or she always gets when you page him. I don't really want to page him, right? And I always thought, well, I mean, but if I'm nice, then they're going to page me, right? Just kidding. But when you think about if that's sort of the response or that sort of becomes your image, how many times don't we get pages? How many times are things sort of left to go or wait for the next person to come along, which certainly affects the patient experience, certainly affects the team experience, and that so-called flying off the handle, which really is not acceptable and not warranted. So I'm going to share with you a little video, which I think is probably the ultimate, and some of you may have seen this, but sort of the ultimate experience of someone not demonstrating self-regulation. And yes, for those of you that know me, you know I'm a sports junkie, so many of my analogies and videos will include sports. But about 5 years ago at the U.S. Open, where Serena Williams had a little bit of an outburst. I don't know if anybody, yeah, okay, so some of you do. And it all started because she was called for a fault and, you know, on the line. Now, I will also tell you that I've had to bleep several things out of this video, and she wasn't saying fault, but it's a presentation, and, you know, I had to, so just pay attention to the blips, but think about her reaction. And I really want you to sort of pay attention to the general flavor of the video, and even, I'm going to give you a hint, how does the crowd respond? There's the fault. Okay, no, not an advertisement for edible tennis balls, although I think she did offer to shove the ball down a bleep's throat, right? But did anybody pick up on what was going on at the end of that video? What was the crowd doing? Not, please, not all at the same time. All right, I'll tell you, they were booing. There were boos at the end of that video. Now, I will tell you, for this match, the majority of people who were there rooting for Serena Williams. She was sort of the golden child of women's tennis. Everyone wanted her to win. Could get tickets to see Serena Williams. Wouldn't that be incredible? And here we saw, this is a 17-second video. In 17 seconds, the crowd went from cheering her and rooting for her to booing her based on that performance. So think about if that were us, if we had an outburst like that. And I'll be the first to say I think we're much more forgiving of our professional athletes than we are of each other or other professionals, but that's a whole other topic. But I don't know about you, but whatever professional and personal capital I've built up with you, my colleagues, or other areas in the organization, I don't want to blow it in 17 seconds. And again, think about that. 17 seconds, she's being booed. Think about if one of us were to walk onto a floor or witness this. Think if a patient were to witness this. Think about when patients witness us, even how we interact in the cafeteria when we're not breaking HIPAA, but how we interact with each other, how we ride the elevators, how we walk the halls. Do we hold the door for somebody? You know, and it always happens, right? If you're walking the halls and you're late for something, that's when you find someone sort of walking around apparently lost and saying, well, I'm already late for my meeting, what do I do, right? So it's a challenge. The other thing that you witnessed there is, you know, Serena ended up with an $80,000 fine from that little outburst there. Yeah, which, you know, that's a lot of money even to her, but we all love to have $80,000 put back into our cost center. So, again, outbursts, self-regulation can have a lot of interaction. People have those sort of outbursts when you tell them things they don't want to hear. Think about our culture. Are you going to come forward and talk to folks? Think about safety. If this is the reaction you get, would anybody ever come forward with a near miss? No way. And you certainly wouldn't come forward with an error. Oh my gosh, I just hope nobody finds out. So there's a lot of contribution there. I will tell you though, when I look at that video of her, here's where I lose all my own self-awareness, because I think that my arms look like her arms. I mean, I'm going to the rack every morning. I must be getting I'm sorry, Curling Wellness Roanoke, and that's videoed, and now I'm in trouble. But I mean, she's got a nice set of arms there. You got to admit. But other than that, her behavior is pretty poor. So when you think about us trying to build a culture of trust here, you know, if that's the way we react, if that's the way we witness, we're not going to have that. You know, this is something that happened pretty recently of one of our Trillian pharmacists, Susan, actually won an award from the VHHA on Virginians Speak Up for Safety. And that speaks a lot to our culture. And what was the safety? It's when we recognize where potential errors or something in our system isn't right and could have led to an error. But if you don't have the right culture, if you have this type of response of lack of self-regulation or what we call an amygdala hijack, certainly nobody's going to come forward and say, hey, you know, this process we have in place, it really does need to be fixed, or we almost had X, Y, or Z happen, or we did have X, Y, or Z happen. So these outbursts have much more ramifications and downstream effects than just that 17 seconds that you witnessed. Boy, I saw the last time how something got responded to. So we really have to be thinking about when we hear things we don't want to hear, when we see things we don't want to see, how do we respond? How do we respond to it? And hopefully it's never in the middle of a unit or in the middle of the operating room or the middle of someplace where it's witnessed by others. All right, 2 down, 3 to go. So now we move to motivation. Clearly, all of us are in this room because we have a degree of motivation. I venture to say probably none of us have a motivational syndrome or we want to achieve the things that we achieve. But just as in the other domains, the self-awareness and the regulation, when you tie it into emotional intelligence, it always has a little bit of twist to it, right? So motivation is that passion to do work, to be successful, but it goes beyond the money or the status. It goes beyond, oh, I'm going to get that corner office. Oh, I'm going to get my name on the plaque. Oh, I'm going to be recognized in Cheers for Peers. Oh, I'm going to get this sort of work. Those are not bad things, right? But that's not the ultimate thing that's driving that motivation. It's that motivation to pursue those goals with energy and persistence, and actually for sort of a theme or a goal higher than individuals. So a very strong organizational commitment to the organization, not just yourself. Optimism, even in the future of failure or a lot of drastic change, and a real strong desire to achieve. So as I think through this, and many of you will not be surprised by this, you know, the person who was always really a role model to me when I was growing up, and I thought unbelievably a highly motivating person, was sadly the late Pat Summitt. And it's very interesting if you get a chance, and I have no book royalties because I told you I have no disclosures, but if you get a chance, I'd read her last book called Sum It Up, which is all about both as she is having her dementia, and the chapters sort of go through her dementia plus some of her successes. But Pat Summitt is, and I believe still is, the winningest coach in women's basketball, although I'm not sure by the end of the season she still will be, but the first Division I coach in any sport to achieve 1,000 victories. So what if I told you Pat Summitt started out 0-1, because she did. And then what if I told you she actually had zero desire to ever be a coach? The only reason she was at University of Tennessee is she was a grad student to get her master's degree. And at that time, the women's basketball coach, and nobody cared anything about women's basketball or even women's sports at the time, quit. And the athletic director came up there and said, Pat, you're our women's basketball coach. Well, here's the other part of the story few people know. At the time, she didn't even go by Pat. She went by Tricia. Right? So here she is getting her name changed, getting a position she didn't win. And yes, she started out 0-1. And drove a beaten down van, washed the machines themselves, took them to the game. But her motivation was not, one day I'm going to have a basketball court, the actual court named after me. I'm going to be the winningest most coach. I'm probably going to pull in seven figures. It was, wow, this is the task at hand. I'm going to do the absolute best that I could do. And I think most of us in this room know the really sad story of early onset dementia, Alzheimer's type, which actually really took her within 5 years, and she passed away. But if you look at the intensity, I'm going to show you some really intense pictures on Pat Summitt. And these are intentional because motivation and emotional intelligence doesn't always mean being everybody's best friend. It means pushing yourself. I mean, look at that one. I mean, I'd just about do anything if I got that look, right? and those steely blue eyes and the intensity that she had. And people who have played basketball for her will tell you, you know, I didn't necessarily like her, but they'll also tell you, I went to Tennessee as a girl and I graduated a woman. And there's the other operative word. I'm going to talk about motivation. 100% of people who played basketball for Pat Summitt graduated from college. That's an unbelievable statistic. So when you think at how she motivated way beyond self to have that graduation rate and to really develop people. So I would also say to you, some of the tenets of emotional intelligence, many of the tenets of leadership are not easy. And at the moment, it can actually sometimes be quite painful and uncomfortable, right? But that motivation for the right reason, I think, gets folks where they need to be, not just yourself, which is not the goal, it's that organizational or the commitment and the desire to help others. In many cases for us, it's our learners, it's each other, and it's our patients. So pull it back to Carillion. So when you think about, well, what is our organizational why? Why do we come to work every day? Why do we do what we do? How does that tie into our motivation? And is it authentic? And I bet if you looked at, I put 3 on here, I think we'd probably get right which of these probably didn't have authentic core values, and it might be Enron, right? Integrity, communication, respect, and excellence, right? But what is our why? So you've heard me say many times about me when I come to work and I pull into the parking garage and I put that badge on out of my cup holder because I have to do things in routine, right? You know, that's transformative. There's a commitment that goes on when we put our badges on and we come to work. And there's expectations of us, with each other, with our patients, and with ourselves. So we need to be really thinking about that from a motivational statement. I don't need to reiterate to all of you, but we think about our curiosity and our courage and our compassion and our community and our commitment. And is that really what's driving? Is that what's driving us? Is that what's behind our motivation in an EI sense? So what is our why? Well, it's to improve the health of the communities that we serve. Every day, every patient, every time, every encounter. Even if it's a small difference. And then, of course, along the way, help make each other better as well. Some other things when you think about, you know, what things do we sort of do here to take those tenets of emotional intelligence and incorporate it into our organizational culture, because at some point it should just become the thread. And it's the thread of how we do things. You know, we have leadership that inspires. We had the Inspire conference. I showed you that in beating down negative. But for our patients, you know, think about when we do what we do, how is this going to benefit our patients? And these are the conversations, and when we decide to do X, or buy new gadget Y, you know, that ultimate question is, how does this really benefit our patients? What is our true motivation? What do our employees get? How do we make sure that we're also meeting the needs of our employees and making them feel the value we place in taking care of our patients? Do we have that same value that we place in our employees, people who report to us, people to whom we report, people who are equals? Do we have that same level of emotional intelligence and connectivity to them? Okay, empathy. Now, I know you're all thinking, really, we're in healthcare, I don't need to be schooled on empathy. Well, empathy, again, like all the other domains, is just a little bit turned up when you do it in an EI sense. So empathy in and of itself is that ability to understand the emotional makeup of other people, right? So maybe able to understand their emotional makeup, that I know X, Y, and Z, what's going to push so-and-so to go to their amygdala or have a Serena Williams moment. I know what their sensitive spots are. But then in an EI sense, do we then treat those people according to their emotional needs? Do we do that with our patients? Are we empathetic to their emotional needs and what's really kind of driving their feelings or what they're upset about? Or is it just, yeah, well, you know, this is how I'm going to do this, I always do it this way, and I'm going to sort of get through this patient encounter. And I'll tell you, with empathy, again, this comes from the business review, but look at how business looks at and how we can tie in medicine. People who are highly empathetic in an EI sense, there are a lot of expertise in building and retaining talent. Well, I mean, we talk about that a lot here, don't we? But maybe not. Wow, our turnover, our nursing turnover is X. Our employee turnover is this. This division has this turnover. So, you know, what component does empathy or lack thereof play in that? I'm not insinuating that it does, but again, it's one thing to recruit folks and hire folks. It's a whole nother skill set to retain people. A lot of cross-cultural sensitivity. We hear a lot about that. Throw a little thing in here. I think one of the biggest areas where we need empathy in the workplace right now, and not only with each other but with our patients, is cross-generational sensitivity. It is very different taking care of a silent generation or a baby boomer than it is to really form a provider-patient bond with a millennial, right? Millennials, millennials will sign up for your MyChart and want to do their self-scheduling, but what they want out of their health care is almost like the Amazon delivery of health care versus difference of what you say to a silent generation or a boomer. I want to see you back in 3 months, let's schedule that appointment. They're going to want to schedule it. A millennial, I mean, I'm simplifying this, no, I'll see you when I want to see you, and I think I need to see you. And by the way, if I decide at 8 o'clock at night I need to see you, there better be an appointment for me the next day. But also think in our workplace, right? Other than our families, the only place where all the different generations really come together and interact with each other is in the workplace. You can have 3 different generations working together with a lot of different sort of generational norms. Not one is better than the other. I'm not knocking any generation, but even work hours, duty hours, and how much time do we spend doing our charts, and do we take work home? I mean, there's a lot of differences there across, so we've got to have a lot of sensitivity there, and certainly service to our clients and customers, which for us is our patients. So another video, talk about this dry stuff, you got to throw some videos in there. So surprise, it's a sports-related video, but I think this is really, to me, kind of an ultimate display of empathy. So if you think back to our last Summer Olympics, it was a qualifying heat with people. See, I'm not a runner, so I'll say a qualifying heat. People just running around the track, right? All the runners I just insulted you. But do you remember when the 2 runners collided with each other and both went down? Now think about that setting. This is the Olympics. You've trained your whole life for this, and you want to get to where you qualify for the final heat. How many of us would have really stopped? So just think about this, and then let's think about a few scenarios that may sometimes occur in our workplace. And wait till you hear the music. I can't take credit for that. Somebody said, you really ought to have Chariots of Fire playing over top. If you can make that happen for me, I'll take it. So again, I challenge us to think about, if would we have stopped? Would we have taken that moment of where we've trained for everything in our life and just reach out to help somebody else? And not in a scripted situation, not in a scripted situation where this is your patient, this is your emergency, but as events come up day to day. I mean, that's really, to me, just incredibly profound. And what I do think happened was the American, D'Agostino did blow out her knee. There's no orthopods here, so I don't think I butchered that diagnosis. But I think they did let Hamlin then come and get another chance at running another heat. I'm not sure about that, but that's just one of the most highest stakes area where both would stop to try to help the other one, as opposed to maybe I can get up and run and catch up and qualify for the final heat. So really, to me, quite a display of empathy in the highest stakes. Now, not quite what we mean in the healthcare setting, right? But if you can't read in the back, I'll read it to you. Yeah, I mean, he's fine, he's resting, et cetera, et cetera. You know, it'd just be nice if sometimes somebody asked me once, how are you doing? Right? Okay. Well, our organizational empathy, yes, we should be reaching out and saying to folks at times, hey, how are you doing? I mean, a prime example of that is our trust program, right, for when any provider is involved in an unanticipated outcome or medical error. We reach out and say, hey, how are you? We're not just going to talk about the clinical contents of the case, but how are we doing, how are you doing as a provider? Our quadruple aim. But, you know, can't be doing this, the setting. It's not appropriate for us to be doing with our patients. It's not about us when we're with our patients. It's about our patients. But then think about, as coworkers, do we support each other? Are we empathetic to each other? We take great pride and great success in taking care of our patients. Do we take care of ourselves, and do we reach out to each other? There's nothing more you know, moving than for a coworker to lend a hand to someone else, or for us to lend a hand to each other. All right, moving along here. So social skills. So social skills kind of pulls it all together, right? That's the proficiency in managing relationships and building networks. So, you know, and able to find a common ground and build rapport. And I would say with this one, as I've commented on the others, this one, I think, as you move sort of along that food chain or up the ladder, this one can get a little difficult because you can get a few blinders on. I think you always have to be asking yourself, gosh, are people really following, engaged in this project or this mission because they really believe in it, or is it because it's felt to be a dictum, or this is what we're doing and this is how it has to go? Because people will go through the motions, but then if offered an option or something different, if they're not really bought in to the common ground and the importance of it, the commitment to it is going to be different. And folks that are high in social skills and emotional intelligence, they're good in leading change. Why? Because they interact with the team. They get feedback. They explain the why of what we're doing. They talk through it. They're persuasive but not overbearing, right? And a lot of expertise in both building and leading teams through a lot of dialogue, through a lot of communication, through social skills, through empathy, through self-regulation, through self-awareness. So you sort of, you know, you pull it all together. But it's not easy. It's easy to stand at a podium and talk about emotional intelligence. Not so easy as we get our daily challenges. So here's an example. Here's somebody who has really been working on her self-awareness, and she's got it down. She says, you know what, my New Year's resolution is I have got to stop putting my foot in my mouth. And I bet yours is you want to lose weight. Now, right, so again, we see it's so easy to laugh at cartoons. But how many times, if we were true to ourselves, do we get so close in a conversation or a situation or in leadership and we just say the wrong thing? I mean, I can stand here, and there's many people in this room who will attest to this. I know that my mouth comfortably accommodates a size 8.5 shoe. So I regularly stick my foot in my mouth. Sometimes I don't even realize it. I realize it later. But we have to ask, what do we do when we're the deliverer of this message? You know, do we go back? Do we apologize? Do we acknowledge it? Or similarly, what do we do when we're the recipient of it? Do we have a Serena Williams moment? Do we say, you know, that just really offended me what you said. I didn't think I needed to lose weight. I mean, you know, or do we say nothing and it brews and it harbors and it comes out 6 or 7 days down the road when something else sets us off. So again, cartoons, but we do need to be thinking about this. Now, I really emphasize under social skills that what's really so important is finding that common goals, common ground, you know, really pursuing the same goal. And I would say, though, that I think in this next slide, they took it a little bit too far. Right. All of us in this room would agree that they have a common goal. No doubt about it, right? But they sort of literally took the common ground a step too far, right? My toll booth lane, your toll booth lane. But if we're honest to ourselves, let's think about how many times have we tried to embark on a common goal and we didn't quite get there. We had a goal, we had a vision. I think I've had, from the time I was a resident, I have all these really great research project ideas, but I just never can quite get them off the ground and really get them to where they need to be. So it's not always just having that goal. It's how do we execute on the goal? How do we make healthcare as a team sport really work? And you know, our goal is we're going to deliver multidisciplinary care, right? We're going to do crew resource rounds. We're going to do huddles. How do we make that happen? Oftentimes the challenge is in the details, right? It's not in the goal, and it's not in a mission statement. It's how do we do it day in, day out, minute to minute? And sometimes we get stuck in our toll booths. And by the way, you know, I'm from Pennsylvania, so these are not Pennsylvania drivers. These are New York drivers. Sorry for those of you who came from New York, and I think it's a New Jersey toll booth. So Roanokeers and Pennsylvanians, we didn't drive like this. So let's maybe try to pull it back a little bit. So we talked about a lot of things: the empathy, the finding the common ground, the treating people according to their needs, the self-awareness and self-regulation. And so here's another book I think that's really helpful to us, and hopefully we think about it on some of the points from a daily basis. Just from Robert Fulghum. Everything I really needed to know I learned in kindergarten. And look at some of these principles. So if we share everything and we played fair and we didn't hit people, well, certainly in the workplace we're not hitting each other, but our words can hit. A simple eye roll can really be devastating to somebody. You know, how we interact with our patients. Do we sit down? Are we kind of going towards the door? Are we looking at something else? Are we distracted? You know, if we put things back where we found them and clean up your own messes, I think it's really interesting. All you have to ever do is go to sign outs. If the incoming team thinks that they just got a whole bunch of stuff dumped on them, right, doesn't always make for the best sign outs, right? So why don't you clean up your own mess? Why are you leaving me 7 more people to see, and, you know, 2 in the ED and 3 in triage or whatever? It doesn't always sit so well, right? But you got to employ then the tenets of emotional intelligence and talk through these things. Say you're sorry when you hurt somebody. You know, when's the last time we told somebody you were sorry? Or, wow, if I had to do over, I would have done that differently. It's not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of emotional intelligence and strength. You know, wash your hands before you eat. Well, flu season, wash your hands all the time, right? But, you know, think about that. What does that really mean in the workplace? Well, do we come into work tomorrow morning still having some stuff from yesterday on our minds, and have we really kind of washed, or are we sort of, I'm gearing up for that next interaction? I mean, after all, we are only human. And flush, like, get rid of it. Like, don't be carrying this around. So I think about, what do I think are some leadership lessons, and trying to tie those into the tenets of emotional intelligence and what we really stand for here. There's a couple. You know, treat people as your most important resource, because they are. And that includes our patients, includes each other, includes our coworkers, includes everybody that we interact with here. You know, one of the first impressions people have when they come into our buildings, none of us even affect. It's environmental services that affects it. Valet parking affects some of their initial points. When's the last time we acknowledge those folks and thank them and for the contributions that they make to our patients' outcomes? So keep thinking about do your job and empower others to do theirs. You know, one of the things I'll hear a lot about is, you know, none of us really like to be micromanaged, right? So, you know, do your job, let other people do it. Be truthful, be transparent, and be authentic. And when you make a mistake, because we're not perfect, own it. Listen more than you talk. You know, I've heard that adage, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them in proportion. Very valuable lesson that I learned the really hard way when I was first a residency program director more years ago than I care to admit was, remember, there's always 2 sides to every story. And I would even argue now and say sometimes there's probably 3. But, you know, that reaction of something really sensational gets brought to you and, you know, you're hearing one side of the story. And you can't help but, right, remember that 0.03 seconds, right, it's going to our amygdala. So how do we allow time to hear 2 sides of every story? Remember, consistency trumps fairness. So be consistent, because if what your goal is to really be fair, most decisions that we make, someone may think is not fair to them personally, but be consistent. So be sort of predictable, but be consistent, and never be afraid to make a mistake, as long as you're willing to own your mistake and learn from it. We think a little bit also about more of our cultural organizational EI. This is from our Shine Awards 2 years ago. And if you want to think about something that's really taken off organizationally are our Shine Awards. The applications for awards have gone up, the projects have gone up, the emphasis on quality has gone up. But what I love most about this picture and what was so refreshing about this year's Shine Awards, many of the awards that were given out and granted were to teams. And what does that tell you? It's not about one person submitting something that they might have been the lead on if they were. It's about the team that contributed to that award, that change in care, that decrease in infection, that whatever it is, of how the team got better. And to see people celebrate being recognized, it's really quite a moving event. So, you know, what are we celebrating? What else is our EI? You know, we've got to also just tie in. It's not just all work, right? We have functions that we do here where we do things outside of work. Patients who are here for a long time. We talked about the horse story, but patients having a birthday party on a unit for perhaps the child of a parent who's been in the hospital for a long time, or for a patient. The Red Noses were from the Keeley Arts program, not this year, but the year before, when Dr. Julian Meyer was recognized, and his was all about humor in medicine and how the art of humor helps. Yeah, there's Don Hall and I with the Hokie bird. Not really sure what to say there, except got to get down on the field and meet the Hokie bird. But anyway, but again, more doing that. There's Nancy at one of the Salem Red Sox Day handing out tickets and participating and showing, hey, I recognize the work that people do, and I want to be here to help hand out. So when we think about a couple questions here, your culture and your organization's EI, and your unit's EI, and your department's EI, I'd ask us a couple questions. How do we end our emails? Just think about it. Right, and email's different, but do we end them with a thanks? You know, do we acknowledge emails that we get? Believe me, I get it. It's hard. In fact, I'm standing here right now thinking, I wonder how many emails I got in the last hour. But, you know, people send you stuff. Even just a quick, thanks for looping me in, or thanks, acknowledging that someone took that time. But do we end our emails with a recognition of others? There's another one. How do you start your meetings? All right, well, let's get going. All right, we got a couple things we have to get through today. Or is it, hey, here's what we're going to talk about today. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I know we got a packed agenda, so I want everybody to have an opportunity to talk about whatever it is on our agenda. But is it a welcoming, or like what's the sense that we send to have that meeting? How How do we start our huddles? I got so much going on, we got to get through this. I mean, think about that, because everybody's observing what we do. Remember, only 7% of communication is verbal. The other 93% is all nonverbal. What do people in your organization do when they encounter a visitor who appears to be lost or confused? Do we stop? I mean, what's actually really interesting is you do stop and they ask you a question and you don't know how to help them, and it's even like, oh, let me get someone to help us, or where is X, Y, or Z? But I mean, do we take the time? Hey, can I help you? You look like you might need something. Sometimes they say no, I'm just kind of whatever, or they might say, yeah, I'm trying to find the ED. Well, it's one floor up, and let me help you. But do we do it? And do we do it if we're behind? Do we do it if we have something else on our mind? When was the last time you told someone you were sorry for something, or we were told we were sorry when something happened? That's a really powerful statement. I'm sorry. Very, very powerful. Okay, we'll get into a little tougher ones now. Think about some of our employee satisfaction surveys. But how many low performers have you been able to retain and turn into high performers by putting them in a different role, or sort of with the book Good to Great, taking the time to find the right seat for somebody as opposed to off the bus. You know, the Jim Collins Good to Great, right? The person may not be just in the right seat, but they may be a high performer in a different seat. But do we invest in them to try to help them find that right seat? And similarly, if it's not the right seat and we don't have a right seat for them, do we help them find a right seat elsewhere, or give them the tools at least they need to try to see if they can improve? And finally, if we put a new employee on any one of our units and we didn't tell them anything about our culture, we said we're going to randomize you to no orientation. This might be an interesting study to do. And then come back 2 hours later and say, you know what, I want to ask you a few questions. What do you think our organizational mission is? What do you think our culture is? What do you think our tenor is? What do you think folks would say? You know, if we didn't say to them, well, our number one priority, our mission is to improve the health of communities, would they say that? What do you think is most important to us? If we didn't tell them that, we didn't have it on a lot of our placards. So what really is our behavior and sort of the tenor of where folks go? So, you know, each organization has its own level of emotional intelligence, and I think it's the EI that determines our culture. And we know that organizations with high EI have high patient experience, they have less employee turnover, they have higher employee, physician, provider satisfaction scores. And I believe we can teach EI. All of us have sort of our own fundamental chemistry, if you would. But the best way, in my opinion, to teach EI is you have to role model it. Particularly if you're in a leadership role, if you apologize for something, that's very moving. And you should apologize for something if it's determined. But know that our actions have cascading effects. As I gave you the first one with the self-awareness. If you walk in and you're not in a real good mood, right, it's not only are you not in a good mood, you just probably made the unit not in a good mood. Oh, not going to talk to her today. Boy, is she in a bad mood. So a lot of these lessons really do come from things we were taught in kindergarten. I love this quote from Maya Angelou, and I think many of us, I know I could, every time I read this, I think back to a case I was involved in when I was an intern. And, you know, I don't remember exactly what was said to me or exactly what was done, but I sure remember how I was made to feel, and know that people, patients, colleagues, not going to remember exactly what you said, not going to remember exactly what you did, but they sure are going to remember how you made them feel. And a lot of culture, a lot of emotional intelligence is perception, and it's how people are made to feel. So I'll end with sort of a Portuguese proverb, and that's, you know, when there is no wind, you know, you need to row. But if you're not emotionally intelligent, you're not going to know that there is no wind, because you're not even going to be paying attention to your situational awareness. So when there's no wind, you need to row. And, you know, when there is a shark grow a whole lot faster. So there you go. And I'd be remiss not to give thanks. This was actually, part of this was some work that we did with Press Ganey, but lots of, to take the EI talk and sort of do the thing that we did for today. So Dan Shaver and Dr. Gleason and Sandra James and certainly our over 13,000 employees who every day contribute to our culture and our EI and how we do reach out and take care of the community. So thanks for having me. Happy to hear your comments. I always learn things about presentations that were good, bad, or ugly with audience feedback. And for questions.
I just had an instance where upper-level management made a decision that had, as far as I'm concerned, detrimental effects on my workflow and my efficiency. And what made me really upset is that she didn't have the courtesy to come to me and, you know, when my office was right next door to her, and say, Dina, I really appreciate your going through with this. I know it may be difficult for you, but I think it's best for the unit.
So it's about communication, and it's right. And
it's just understanding when decisions are made. What alternatives were looked at? You know, sometimes all I want to know is why did HR make this decision? Because I don't particularly care for it. But what were the alternatives that they looked at, and maybe I won't be so upset about them.
So it's communication, it's the why, it's the how, and allowing, and that's the whole thing about the social skills, right, is you come to bigger decisions. We make lots of big decisions here, right, every day, but what was sort of the input and the feedback, and like I said, you can't really strive for the fairness because someone's always going to, you know, there's always two sides to every decision, but to be consistent and explain the why or the thought process behind it is very important. And, you know, again, I can stand here at the podium. You know, I make mistakes all the time. I err in communication that, gee, I think I communicated something well and I didn't. But the key then is if you hear about it, you learn it, you got to own it and say, wow, I really could have done better, and acknowledge those things.
Thank you, Dr. Weiss. And I don't know about you all, but I am incredibly proud to have an executive vice president and CMO that is so emotionally intelligent. And not only that, but can convey it in a way that helps us to be more emotionally intelligent with our patients, with our learners, with everyone with whom we work. So thank you for that. And I have no doubt that if any of us were in a race with Dr. Weiss and we fell, she would stop to help us up. So,
but I never be in the race because I hate to run. But if you fell off your bike at 5:30 in class, I'll come and help you get back on.
Do me a favor, do yourselves a favor, do everybody you work with a favor. Instead of just leaving and going back to your whatever's plaguing your mind right now, think a few minutes throughout the rest of your day about how you can become more emotionally intelligent throughout your week, throughout your month, throughout each day. Just think about that and apply it. Have a great day.